communication resource to YRL. I also am working for Marigold Library System and Northern Lights. So lots of experience in the library world. I bring more than 40 years experience working in communication and public relations to this, along with the latest and greatest in what's happening in media relations. So things have changed a lot since I first started. And I think that everybody has probably a story to tell about a time when they were interviewed or they had to speak to the media, and then of course what happened with that. So let me just, there we go. Sorry, let me just pull this up. There we go. Hopefully everybody can see that. Great. Well, again, thank you very much for joining me today. I want to talk to you about a couple of things. First of all, we're going to talk a little bit about there you go. About both proactive and reactive media relations. So proactive being when the media call you, proactive when you call the media, and reactive when the media call you. So first of all, we're going to start with just the basics about what is it that media want in the first place. Well, of course, they need a story. Media is very competitive. It's a business. A lot of people think of it like that. Some people actually even think of it as an extension of the government, somehow the official opposition or something, but it's not. It's a business. And so they're all in competition with each other to be the first one with a story, to get the best story, and to get the news out there, from their perspective. So they want a story. They also want to bring a local angle to things, which is really helpful for places like libraries, because you can bring that local human element to play in the local news. So human interest is always a story maker for media. They want to know somebody who's doing something different or something unique. They want to hear about something that has happened, like perhaps you're raising funds and you've exceeded your fundraising goal, or you've got a politician coming to visit your library. These kinds of stories always are of interest to the media. So they're good ways to get media attention if that's what you're looking for. What's newsworthy? Well, things that are sensational. So if you think about a fire, there's actually an expression in the media called if it bleeds, it leads, meaning if somebody's hurt, it's horrible. If somebody's hurt or there's been a disaster of some kind, that will always lead the news. So if you're ever watching the TV news, you'll typically see things like fires, horrific accidents, natural disasters, that kind of thing being quite prominent in the news. The other thing that happens, of course, is it involves prominent people, not only politicians, but celebrities and anybody who's kind of well known. So even in your local community, your local mayor or a prominent business person might be featured in the news. We often see announcements of new programs from government or new funding opportunities, that kind of thing. Politicians love a good announcement because it's typically good news for a sector of their electorate and frankly helps them get reelected. Things that are timely are also very newsworthy. So things that happen, if I'll give you an example from yesterday. It was St. Patrick's Day, and every year, strangely, Chicago dyes their river green to celebrate St. Patrick's Day. I don't know what it takes to dye a river green, but that always makes news because it's a timely thing that's happening in their community around St. Patrick's Day, and the river turns green. And then a local angle on a national or international story. These are the stories you hear, again, typically involving some sort of either natural or man-made disaster, like a plane crash, where they'll tell you how many Canadians were on board. And then further, local media will say there were 3 Canadians on board, one of whom was from Alberta. And then it might drill down even further. 3 Canadians on board, one from Alberta who happened to be from Red Deer. So this is how they take a national or international story and they put a local angle on it, because there's this principle in journalism called the principle of proximity, which means that people are most interested in the things that are closest to home to them. And so when there's an international or national story and there's some angle that brings it close to home, that they know improves readership, eyeballs, viewers, that kind of thing. So they're always looking for a local angle on a national or international story. So we're going to start, first of all, what to do when a reporter calls you, the reactive media relations. And I think this is the one that strikes fear into the heart of pretty much everybody, because, that thought that the reporter is calling and, oh my gosh, what do I do? So the first thing you should know is that reporters should introduce themselves. They should tell you who they are and what media outlet they represent. Now, they don't have to tell you that you're being recorded. So assume that you are. It used to be years ago that they had to tell you you were being recorded, but the laws have changed now such that reporters do not have to tell you if you're being recorded. So if you're on the phone or if they have their cell phone out, they might be recording you. Just assume that they are. If someone asks you questions, you without identifying themselves, you can say, I'm Sue and you are, or who are you with? You really want to know who you're speaking with. There are a lot of bloggers, influencers, and citizen journalists who don't have journalism training. And this has really become an emerging area of concern because they don't have the same journalistic background. They don't follow this necessarily, follow the ethical guidelines, fact checking, that sort of thing that trained journalists have. However, ignore them at your peril because they have significant influence and reach. And so we do have to deal with these people, but you need to know that you need to be extra careful around people who are not trained journalists because they may not do the fact checking or the validation of allegations, that sort of thing. And so you just need to be extra careful around them because they're not necessarily applying the same principles that trained journalists use. So when the reporter calls, the first thing you want to do is stay calm. You can find out what questions they want to ask. It's perfectly acceptable to say, thanks for calling, Fred. Can you tell me a little bit more about what it is you're looking for so that I can help you? This triggers them to tell you what it is that they're looking for, what questions they're asking for. And you should never do a cold call interview, meaning that if a reporter calls you and says, I'm going to pick on Penelope because I know she's on this call, and say, hi, Penelope, I'm calling from, the Stony Plain Reporter. I want to talk to you. These are my questions. You do not have to answer that person in the moment. In fact, you should not answer that person in the moment. Penelope's response should be, thanks, Fred, for calling. And letting me know what it is you're looking for. I'm just going to do a little bit of research here to make sure that I have the facts and figures at hand. So I will call you back in half an hour and we can chat through the information that you're looking for. What this does is it gives you time to mentally prepare, and it takes you out of that fight or flight moment you might be having when the reporter calls you and suddenly you think, oh my gosh, I have to answer the questions and I have to answer them now and I have to be right. And what if I make a mistake? Like all these things go through your mind when a reporter calls you. So the first thing you want to do is just give yourself that breathing space, even if it's something that cold, like the back of your hand. You should still never do the interview right then and there on the spot. You should always tell the reporter you'll call them back. And sometimes it's helpful to even say, can you tell me what your deadline is? Because sometimes if they call you at 11 a.m., they're trying to make the 12 o'clock news. You should know that because you should try and accommodate them when you can. It still doesn't mean you have to answer them then and there on the spot. So figure out when they need to hear back from you. Then you're going to hang up, you're going to collect yourself, you're going to do some research, get those facts and figures together. You're probably going to call, if you have a communication resource available to you, you're going to want to call that person and say, hey, I've got a reporter calling. They want to know about this. Do you have any advice? You should just be as prepared as you can be for the interview. So the first thing, obviously, you want to do is prepare your key messages. And this is simply, what do you want people to know? And this is something that I try and really reinforce with people when I do media relations training. It's not just about the questions that the reporter is asking, but it is about the things you want people to know. And politicians are super gifted at this. You'll probably see them a lot where somebody asks them a question and they'll say, well, that's an interesting question, but first I want to tell you about X. And they'll completely shift to something else that they want to talk about, not necessarily the question that the reporter asked. Now, the reporter will probably follow up and ask the question again. But what that does is it puts the politician's main messages out there to people first. And so it gives you that opportunity to position yourself and your messages before you go down any rabbit hole with a reporter. So think about the things that you want people to know about this topic. Suppose, let's pick something really simple. Suppose you're starting a book club for seniors at your library, and the local reporter wants to know all the details about the book club. Well, you should have ready at hand the who, what, where, when, and why. So who, it's seniors are welcome. It's specifically for seniors. What, it's a book club. We're going to meet, where, at the library. When, Thursday evenings, every Thursday for a month. And why, this is a great way to socialize, to get to meet other people in the community, and to, collectively enjoy a really good book. So you should have those facts at hand. Now, it might seem self-evident, but writing them down and just having them there, make sure that you don't overlook something, and that, again, you get out all the information that you want people to know about that program. You're also going to want to keep it super simple. Don't use any jargon or acronyms. Don't tell people that, they have to go on Overdrive or Libby or any of that stuff. That's jargon that the average person doesn't understand. Just keep it simple, keep it plain language. It's usually 3 or 4 main messages, a really brief, memorable, book club Thursdays, every Thursday this month for seniors to socialize. Those are really simple things that I just said, and I was able to repeat them. So you want things that are easy for you to remember and easy for you to recall, so that when you're speaking to the reporter, you give out the relevant information. You should also prepare some relatable statistics and facts. So this is our 3rd book club of the year. The previous 2 were for teens and for moms of small children. This is our 1st of the year for seniors. This is all really good information that a reporter is going to want to know, because it gives your program context. If you have any other facts and figures that you want to relay, you can do that at that time. But this is what you want to do in your preparatory time while you're, in that time between when the reporter calls and when you call that person back. So I'm going to give you an example. We did some messaging last year during Pride Month because several libraries faced some, I wouldn't say issues, probably challenges with local media and Pride Month and the various Pride programming that libraries offer. So we made some very straightforward key messages. These were shared with your library, so you've probably seen this already. But one key message is that libraries are welcoming spaces and that they celebrate the rich diversity of everybody in the community. So that sets the stage to say that we're open for everyone. We don't distinguish one person to a next. Everyone is welcome at our library. The next message is around safety and respectful spaces. So this is around, again, trying to set the stage that, because you're going to get to the Pride programming here, but first you want to talk in general about libraries. So libraries are those safe, accepting, respectful spaces for people to visit, learn, and grow. And I've often heard librarians say things like, libraries are one of the last few places you can go that's free, that also is, generally speaking, a safe and respectful environment. So you might want to add the word free in there. Then to get to the point about why are you offering, the classic has been drag queen story time. You can say that, libraries offer a range of programming that educate and inform, and not every program is right for every person. And we respect that some people may not want to participate in this, but there are people who do. And so we need to respect the rights of both groups in offering our programming. And if this program isn't right for you, I'm sure we offer something else that would be, more fitting for what you're looking for. And then the last bit you could use only if necessary. And that is this whole notion around that, library staff are not going to tolerate any threats or intimidation, and such acts will be reported to the police. I usually save that statement in case a reporter goes down the road of things like, well, we've heard that people are going to protest in front of the library, or that there's a lot of angry people. That's when you can use a message like this to just respond and say, we respect their right to protest. That is, a charter right. However, we will not be intimidated, and we will not tolerate any threats. And so if there's anything that feels like violence to us, we will be calling the police. So it just, again, sets the stage and puts some parameters around your messaging. And this is a particularly challenging topic. This is not the same as senior story time. Obviously, these kinds of activities tend to draw a lot of controversy, and people are divided on how they feel about things like drag queen story time or any pride activity. So when you're crafting your message, you want to make sure that you are firstly setting the stage about the function of libraries in the community. That's those welcoming spaces, respectful, that sort of thing. Then you want to talk next about the fact that you offer a range of programming. There's lots of opportunity for all kinds of people in the community, and this is just one of many programs that are offered. And then lastly, if asked about threats or that sort of thing, you can respond with the notion that you're not going to tolerate any threats. What you want to do when you're doing a media interview is really control the message. And I think this is a perspective that not many people consider. They think the reporter is in charge, when in actuality, you're in charge. You can control the message in a media interview. You can use and repeat the same messages often. So you can, again, thinking back to that Pride Month example, if the reporter persists in saying, well, why on earth would you even offer this kind of programming? You go back to that message about libraries being safe and respectful spaces that welcome everyone. We offer a range of programming. This is just one of many programs we offer. And you just keep repeating that. And that can be a very solid response to a question where they're trying to lead you down the road. Because sometimes a reporter's job is to stir things up. They want you to get excited about something, and then what they're going to do is tootle off to folks who have been voicing opposition to this, and they'll say, well, the library manager said, and then that gets them riled up, and then they tootle back to you, and so forth. So you want to maintain that calm, even demeanor, and you want to just keep repeating the same sort of solid messages that won't essentially get you in any trouble. You can answer their questions, but always try and add a key message if you can. So you can say, if the reporter says, well, are you going to bar children from coming into the library during Pride Month because parents are upset? You can say, we welcome everyone in the library, and we would never bar anybody from the library who is looking to use it for its intended purpose, which is a safe, educational, learning, enjoyable environment. So that reinforces this notion that libraries are meant to be safe spaces. know what you can answer and what you can't. And so if somebody following this thread, if a reporter says, well, how much are all the pride activities costing the library? And say perhaps you're the programming person. You can say, you know what, you're going to have to speak to my library manager about that. I don't have that fact or figure in front of me. It's also okay to say, I don't know, or that's beyond the scope of my job. Those kinds of phrases are perfectly fine to say. You should never guess, you should never assume, and you should never try and speculate on a response. If you don't know, just simply say, I'm sorry, I don't know that. You can offer to get back to the reporter if necessary. So if it's a simple question like how much does something cost, you can go to your library manager, get the information, and then call the reporter afterward. That's perfectly fine. But don't ever try and guess. Don't say, well, gee, I think it was $3,000 last year, and then we had a bit of an increase, and let's say to $3,250 or something. Don't do that because that just causes a lot of confusion. And then the other thing that I tell people is don't use absolutes. Don't promise anything. Don't ensure that something is going to happen. Don't guarantee. Try not to use words like everybody or nobody, because those are absolutes. And there's, as we all know, a great grayscale continuum in life. And so it's very difficult to promise something's going to happen or to ensure that something's going to happen. I see that a lot. Well, we ensure that people can come in, on a daily basis. Well, you're making a guarantee. What if there's a flood? So just don't use absolutes. I find it's easier to use words like most of the time, some of the time, often we see this, those kinds of things, because it gives you that little bit of wiggle room. So what not to do? Don't make jokes, because as much as I like to make jokes and I I like to, make sure that we're all not taking life too seriously. This is not the time. This is not the time to make a joke. It can be misconstrued. It could be quoted verbatim, which again, out of context, might seem insensitive or, just inappropriate. Don't speculate, as I mentioned. Don't offer personal opinions. Sometimes reporters will say to you, well, you've told me what the library's policy is on this, but what do you personally think about it? Don't offer a personal opinion, because there's nothing in it for you. There's nothing to be gained. Secondly, if your personal opinion happens to stray a little to the left or the right of the library policy, you sure don't want to say that. It's better just to stay to the library policy on something and then remind the reporter that you are there speaking on behalf of the library in that moment. You should never comment on a personnel issue. So if someone's been fired, if someone has a medical condition or a medical issue happen, these kinds of things, you never want to speak about that. You can simply say no comment, or I don't have any comment on that. Don't comment on incidents under police investigation or something that's before the courts. So again, if, God forbid, somebody dies in your library, could happen. Someone has a heart attack and dies, but maybe the police are called in. During that time, the police control all communication. So you just refer them to the police and you say, I'm sorry, that matter is with the police. They're over there. Go talk to them. And anything before the courts. So if your library or library system is involved in any kind of legal action, you never want to talk about that. You want to leave the debate and the discussion inside the court and for the court to decide. So you don't want to ever debate things in the public realm. And then lastly, you never want to be an unnamed source. So if something's going on, you don't want to be that person that says, well, confidentially, you didn't hear it from me, but don't do that. 9 times out of 10, we can figure out who you were. And then you're going to get probably fired. And there could be also other implications to that. Mostly, you could be sued. It's just not a good place to be. So don't be an unnamed source. There's also no such thing as off the record. I hear this a lot. If a reporter asks you to speak on something off the record, it doesn't exist. You can't unknow something. If I tell you something, you can't unknow it. And so if you tell a reporter something off the record and they promise not to use it, well, a month could go by and they'll be writing a different story and they'll go, hey, I remember somebody said something about that once. Boom, right? There's no such thing as off the record. You can't unknow something. And I think that's probably a really key thing to always bear in mind is once somebody knows something, they can't unknow it. Even if they're trying to honor the spirit of the confidentiality, it happens. Life goes on. So some general tips, you are not live. So it's okay for you to take your time, respond thoughtfully. If someone asks you a question, you don't have to rush to an answer. You can just pause for a moment, even if they're being recorded, even if you're in front of a TV camera. They will edit out that gap. So don't worry about it. You're not going to look like a fool. You're not going to look like you don't know what you're talking about. Take your time. It's better to do that and respond thoughtfully than to rush into an answer and then go, oh, gee, I misspoke. You don't want to be in that situation either because it just really blows your credibility. It's okay for you to check your notes for facts and figures. So if someone asks you about how many materials you circulated last year, it's okay for you to actually pull out a piece of paper and look at it. That's fine. Better to be sure and better to have somebody realize that you are, double checking the facts than to, again, think that you're speculating or guessing or that kind of thing. If you do say something wrong, even if you realize it a few minutes later, you can say to the reporter, I'm sorry, can we go back to that question you asked a couple of minutes ago? I've just realized I've given you the wrong number. It should actually be X. That's, again, perfectly fine. What you want to do as much as possible is if you make a mistake, correct it in the actual interview at the time. If you make a mistake and you realize afterward that you made a mistake, then by all means, contact the reporter and correct it as soon as you can. Most reporters are very good about understanding that sometimes people make mistakes and they will update their information. Okay, so again, you don't have to worry about being perfect. Obviously, you want to be accurate for sure. But, mistakes do happen and it's okay to say, oh my gosh, I think I misspoke. I'm now recalling that it should be this instead of that. Perfectly fine. Handling tough questions. So, answering easy questions about seniors book club is one thing. Answering hard questions or questions that, there's a little bit of controversy about, that can be difficult. So generally speaking, don't comment on things outside of your responsibility or sphere of influence. And I think a great example of this, Carla had sent out we had worked together on some key messaging around the potential Edmonton Public Library strike that fortunately didn't happen. But we reminded everyone that that's EPL's business and not ours. And therefore, not something you should be commenting on. You can't comment on their wage situation, their working conditions, their whatever. So if a reporter was to contact you in that kind of circumstance and say, well, EPL's out on strike. Do you have the same working conditions? What's your salary range? All that kind of stuff. Don't get involved. The strike is none of your business. So that's a really good example of making sure that you stick to your knitting, stick to what you are responsible for, your sphere of influence. You simply can say, I'm sorry, we're not involved in any way in that situation. So you're going to have to go in and speak to, EPL and the union if that's the kind of information you're looking for. Just deflect and just don't answer it. You can rely on policies and standards that are applied universally. So you can say things like, let's take the Pride programming again. This is a good opportunity to say that, one of our policies is to make sure that we are offering quality programming that meets the needs of people in the community. And this is just one more example. So you're referring to a policy that then lets the reporter know that you're not making this up as you go. You didn't suddenly decide, hey, I think, it'd be a good idea if we put an aquarium in the library and suddenly talk to kids about how to eat fish. There's probably a programming policy that says these are the kinds of things that you do, and this is the sort of learning opportunities that you provide, or or entertainment opportunities, that sort of thing. So I think that you can always fall back on a policy if you are being questioned about something that's a little tougher to handle. And again, never speculate or assume. Best way to handle a tough question when you don't know the answer is simply to say, I don't know. It is good to have numbers on hand, as I mentioned before, simple things like how many materials were circulated, how many card holders does the library have. You can even, if you're interested, or depending on the nature of the interview, put some context to it. So there are 3,100 card holders. That equates to, 42% of the population or something. If you can give that kind of context, it helps a little bit. Same thing with the number of materials circulated. If you can say that there were 10,000 materials circulated, and that equates to 2.5 materials per person in our town. Things like that just help give context to the big number. We're so used to seeing big numbers, especially when you're talking about things like federal budgets or even provincial budgets, where they're talking in billions of dollars. So talking about 10,000 materials may not seem significant to the average person, but it is in fact quite significant. So if you can equate it to things that people know, then it's an easy way to just give that context and help people understand the sort of the scale of your operation and what it is you're doing. Things like, what budget increases have you received in the last 2 years? You're definitely going to want to kick that one up to the library director. If you are the library director, you're going to want to be able to speak to any provincial and municipal funding increases you received. Don't forget to let the public know that you have multiple sources of funding. I think this is an area that's often misunderstood. So, in that, you can also say we were also fortunate to have a fundraising campaign that raised money to buy more materials or whatever. We also got some donations, whatever all goes into your budget, not just the municipal funding or the provincial funding. I think we get hung up on those two, but we really need the public to understand that most libraries have multiple sources of funding. Tricks of the trade. I love this particular one because this usually gives people hives. But here we go. One of the first tricks of the trade that I've seen used, actually has been used on me, is silence. You also see it a lot if you watch 60 Minutes. That's where a reporter asks somebody a question and the person answers the question, and then the reporter stops talking and looks at you expectantly like, you need to tell me more. Don't. If you've said everything you want to say, stop the conversation. Silence is uncomfortable, and most people will fill the silence with other words, things that they maybe didn't want to talk about, that then takes the reporter down a different path, right? Because remember, reporters don't know what you know. So they're looking for those openings. They're looking for something says, "Ooh, this sounds interesting. I'm going to ask more questions about that." So if a reporter asks you a question and you answer the question, you've said everything you want to say about it, and the reporter stops talking, just stop talking till their next question. Don't feel the need to fill that silence, especially if you're on TV camera, which is really a hard thing, because we feel that burden. We feel oh my God, everybody's looking at me, I should say something. In actuality, the burden is with the reporter. He or she is the one who has to fill the airtime. So don't worry about it. They'll edit it out. Another trick is multiple rapid fire questions. So you see this happen a lot in with politicians, where a reporter will say, what is the budget for the library this year? And while you're at it, what was the budget last year? And what do you project the next budget to be? So there's like multiple questions there. And it can be confusing. And sometimes reporters do that to try and throw, particularly politicians. They're a little nicer sometimes to people who aren't politicians, but particularly for politicians, they'll try and throw you off your game. So when that happens, you just stop and you say, I'm sorry, you've asked a couple of questions there. Can we back up? And always address every question. So ask them to go back to the beginning and say, what was the first question you asked me again? And make them go through each question one at a time. This allows you to formulate your response, to answer the question, and then see what the next follow-up question might be. It might not be what they first fired off in rapid succession. So always stop them and say, I'm sorry, you've asked multiple questions. Let's just back up. I'd like to address the first question and then we can continue. The next trick that some reporters will use is an incorrect statement that's followed by a question. Now, the reason this is a problem is that if you don't correct the statement, they can accept your silence as agreeing with the statement. So it might be something like, I understand the library budget last year got a 50% increase, but what I really wanted to ask you about is, can you tell me how many new books you have in your collection and are wait lists coming down? Whoa, hold the phone. What you want to do is you want to go back and you want to say, happy to answer your question, but first I have to correct your statement. We did not receive a 50% increase last year. That is completely false. So, and in regard to your current question, wait lists are down, whatever the question is. But don't let any incorrect statement stand. You have to challenge it. You have to correct it, because this is where people often feel they were misquoted. They will a lot of reporters will just throw things out and see what happens. And if you don't correct it, that's where you can be misquoted. Hypotheticals. So, a reporter could say, so your library hasn't had any issues with I'm going to choose Pride Month programming again, and apologize if this sounds repetitive, but it's just an example. I understand you haven't had any problems with your Pride Month programming, but what would you do if someone decided to organize a protest and blocked people from coming into the library? That's hypothetical. You don't owe them any kind of response around emergency protocols or anything like that. You just simply say, I'm sorry, but that's a hypothetical question. That is not happening. We're very happy with the response we've had to our programming, and we look forward to welcoming people to the library. That end. You do not have to try and give them your whole playbook on how you deal with emergencies or your emergency protocol. Unless they specifically ask you, what is your emergency protocol? That's a different question. That's not a hypothetical. But the hypothetical would be, what would you do if? Don't answer it. And the last one, this one, actually, I knew two reporters, one for the Edmonton Sun and one for the Edmonton Journal. Oh, and I knew someone at CTV too. Oh, and someone at Global. Yeah, who they pretend to be your best friend. Hi, Sue, how's it going? Man, I haven't seen you in ages. How are things? And they do a little chit chat and they pretend that they're your best friend. And then they will start asking you some hard-hitting questions. And when that happens, what they're trying to do is get you to relax and think of them as a buddy, as a friend. And then you're going to talk about stuff maybe that you didn't intend to, because they're your friend, they're your pal. Nope. Always have your guard up. Always, no matter how friendly they seem or how nice, or, even after the interview, you walk away and go, wow, that guy's really nice. Yeah, great. He treated you nicely. That's super. Stick to your key messages, stick to your area of responsibility. Don't get drawn into talking about things because it feels like you're talking to your best friend. They're not your friend. They have a job to do. And again, just around this notion of it's okay to say you don't know. You don't have to feel pressured. You can pause before answering. You can think about it and go, do I know the answer to that? Maybe I don't. Just tell them you get back to them, and then follow through as quickly as you can. The longer you leave a vacuum of information, the more likely they are to go fishing. So they might go around and ask a colleague. They might ask a library board member who hasn't been briefed on the topic. They might ask a patron outside the library. So the longer you leave them without an answer, they'll go hunting. So you want to get back to them as quickly as you can with the proper answer. Always remember, no reporter will ever know more about your library than you do. And I think that this is probably the best advice I can give you is people are always afraid, what if I make a mistake? What if he asks me something I don't know? Well, we've covered that, but also it's okay because the reporter will never know more about your library than you do. Remember, if they're talking to you, their next assignment might be to talk to a farmer about the upcoming anticipated drought. And then after that, they're going to talk to a business person about a cafe that's shutting down in town. Like they're all over the place. So they can't possibly know more about your topic than you do. So just be calm, be authoritative, be firm, and you will handle your interview with great aplomb, I'm sure. Before we get into issues management, I just want to check the chat and see if there are any questions. Okay. Let me just go up to the top. So I've had a patron come in and say to me they feel unsafe with the LGBTQ materials we have on display. How can we say we are a safe place when a patron says that they aren't feeling safe in our space? That's a great question. Is there something you can do to move the materials so that they're still on display, but maybe not the first thing someone sees when they come into the library? Can you direct the person in another direction and just say, I'm sorry that you feel that way. If you come over here, that kind of thing. You can always redirect them. I think you can also come back to the main statement around, it has to be a welcoming space for everyone. And while you respect that this is not something that they're interested in, we do need to have materials available to the people who are interested. So some of those things can help. I no longer use the word safe. Security, good. Security is good. If that's a better word for you, great. And then there was a question in the Q&A. I'm trying to start phrases conversations with I'm sorry. Is it necessary to apologize if I don't know something? I've been practicing using actually. Yeah, you don't have to apologize unless that's, how you want to respond. You can simply say, actually, I believe you have that information incorrect. Here's the correct information. Or unless you did make a mistake, most people apologize when they make mistakes. So I'm sorry I made a mistake. But if the reporter is giving you something that's not factual, and say, well, actually, that's not the case. Here's the information. Here's the data. This is how we know, whatever the situation might be. Yeah. Again, it comes back to that sort of authoritative stance that you're going to take. You are the person who knows the information. You are the one who knows your library best. And then by extension, you also know the library world better than the reporter around, standards and practices that are common among libraries. So you know about those things and the reporter doesn't. So if you need to correct a reporter's information, yeah, you can say, actually, that's not really the right statistic, or you can say, actually, we don't use that anymore. The new approach is to do this, those kinds of words. Yeah. Any other questions on the reactive part? It's the hard part. So after this, it does get a little easier. Okay, let's move on. Oops, there we go. So we're going to do a little royal case study here on issues management, because I think that sometimes people, when something happens, they don't know what to do. So sometimes people think it's best just to stay silent. Maybe it is. Sometimes it isn't. So here's our little royal case study. So we all know that King Charles has cancer. His communications team has done several things very well to manage this situation. First of all, they came out with the fact that he had cancer. Now, they didn't say what type. That's okay. There's a level of information there that people can kind of wrap their heads around and think, I think I might know what the treatment could be, or, what it might involve. So you can kind of put yourself in his shoes. So they did that. The other thing they did was they had regular images of Charles. There was a couple of pictures of him walking to and from church. For example, there was this picture that just came out a couple of weeks ago when the king held an audience with our prime minister. There was another picture of a couple of people that he held in-person audiences with. So he's been popping up from time to time, and they've been showing him at work. This is very reassuring, particularly to the British people, because they can see that he's, seems to be functioning, seems quite capable, looks like he's having a conversation, he's not debilitated in any way. So it's just a little reassuring. And having him pop up from time to time in very controlled setting helps them control the message. What they're doing is they're reassuring the public that, yes, he has cancer, he's getting treatment, but he's still doing business, which is what they've said from the beginning. Contrast that with the hashtag Where's Kate or Where is Kate? I've seen both. The reason I pulled these examples is that I feel like unless you've been, living off the grid for a bit, you've undoubtedly heard of what's been going on. Kate's people, in my view, have handled this completely wrong. She hasn't been seen since Christmas. There were no pictures of her going into the hospital or coming out, whereas with the king, there were pictures of him both going into the hospital and coming out. So there were no pictures of that. Like, she literally has not been seen since Christmas. When she left the hospital, usually there's a picture of, the royal in the back of a car or something. No pictures. Fast forward to, people were starting to ask, well, gee, what's wrong with her? Because all they would say is abdominal surgery, which was very loosey-goosey. Nobody really knows what that means. So therefore, you can't empathize like you could with the king and his cancer. You can't put yourself in her shoes and think, oh my gosh, wow, that's major surgery. So I can understand. Like, there's none of that. There were no random pictures or even controlled pictures of her going for a walk in the garden or even sitting and reading a book. Like, there's been nothing. And so in that vacuum, you've probably seen the interest ramp up to now it's become pretty much a full-blown crisis. And I feel that very soon she's going to have to make an appearance. People are creating memes. I've seen all kinds of stuff, cardboard cutouts in the window, cartoon kind of things. People are speculating, where's Kate? And now they're joking about it. She got a bad haircut, so she's letting it grow out. I heard she had a Brazilian bum tuck. She had, people are making up jokes now because it's gotten to that stage. So on the one hand, you have the king, who's got cancer. It's very serious, but people feel reassured and they're not bugging him. On the other hand, you've got Kate. Don't really know what's going on with her. She hasn't been seen. And the speculation is all over the map. They recently, last week, they brought in some sort of rumor about an alleged affair that William was having with one of her friends, and that's why she hasn't been seen. The speculation is just off the charts. I think that the biggest thing that happened was the doctored photo. People were now questioning whether or not she even sat for that photo or if that photo was taken several months ago, further adding to this notion of where is Kate. So I don't think that her people have handled this well at all. They needed to be in front of it. They needed to have frequent, controlled, like I say, it could be a picture of her having a cup of tea. Just something that says, here she is, you can see for yourself. So if this happens to you, if a crisis happens to you, there's 3 key rules that come into play. Firstly, you want to say it first. You want to control the narrative. You want to get out in front of it like the king did. His people came out, they said, He's been diagnosed with cancer. He's going to be getting treatments. He's going to be staying at Sandringham while those treatments are underway. He's removed himself from public engagements, but he will still work. So they said it all first. Kate's people didn't really do that. They just said abdominal surgery, and she won't be seen until after Easter. Not quite enough information. So that's the next one. Say it all. Be honest and transparent. Say as much as you possibly can to be transparent during your crisis. So you want to give as many facts as you can and just be open with people, because you can see what's happening here. And this is such a great example. In the Kate instance, people are now making stuff up like crazy. And, they're speculating. It's become fodder for late night hosts, the whole bit. And if they had just been a little more honest and a little more transparent, showed her a little bit, like, she would have been treated the same way they're treating the king, which is nothing to see here, folks. Instead, they've actually done the opposite, and they've ramped it up. And then say it often. Give frequent updates. And so moving away from the royal situation, suppose there was a small fire at your library and it burned the staff room. Say, I don't know, something in the microwave went off, burned the staff. So you're going to want to give frequent updates on not the fire circumstance itself. You're going to leave that to the fire department. But after they've gone, when will the library reopen? Here's what we're doing to fix the situation. There were some materials that were damaged, and so those have been ordered. Like, all the updates that you can give on a situation really helps to keep things calm and reassure the public that you're on top of it and you're handling the situation. So you can see in this instance all the things that the King's communication team did right versus all the things that Kate's communication team did not do properly. And I should say as well, sorry, just going back there. The other thing is that if you even if you don't have anything to say, sometimes you still have to give an update. So you need to say, and we've done this a lot. I've handled a few crises where they're an evolving situation. And what you do is you say to the reporters, I'll be back to you in 30 minutes with an update. And even if you have no new information, you go back to the reporters in 30 minutes and you say, there's no new information to share at this time, but I wanted to come back to you and let you know that. I will be back to you again in another 30 minutes. And you have to stick to that kind of frequency, and you have to honor your commitment. So if you say 30 minutes, you have to go back to them and say, it's been 30 minutes and this has happened, but I have no more information on that or that, whatever the update is. Again, this helps to squash any kind of speculation or rumor. It helps reporters not go around and try and get answers from other people. So again, think in terms of perhaps a fire and your staff are outside the building. You don't want any of those people talking to reporters, so you're going to give an update, or the fire department's going to give an update depending on the timing of the situation. You don't want them to go around you. You want to make sure that, again, this comes back to controlling the narrative. You want them to go to you as the source, and you can see that this is where it's completely gone off the rails for Kate. Reporters are now talking to their friends, trying to get them to tell things. Her uncle is on some reality TV show and people are asking him. Like, they've gone around Kensington Palace instead of to. And you never want that to happen. You want people to come to you so you can control the narrative. So that's sort of some basic issues management or crisis management 101. Going to move now to proactive media relations. This is a much, for a lot of people, a happier topic. This is how you get publicity for your program. So this is where you are reaching out to the media because you've got a new program that's starting, or you've got a fundraising campaign that you're starting, or something's happening and you want to get some media attention for it. So firstly, the thing that you want to do is be really super clear about your objective. Why are you trying to reach the media? Sometimes people say, hey, you know what would be a good idea? We should call the paper. But they don't really have a firm objective, or they don't really have a like a firm reason about what it is they're trying to get out of that contact. So there's usually a couple of reasons why you would contact the media. The first is to promote an upcoming event or program or activity, or to increase an awareness about something that has already happened or for an announcement. So suppose you have a new reading room that's opening in your library, and you did some fundraising and it's got all new furniture or something, and you had the local mayor come and cut the ribbon. So you would call the media to get a picture of that ribbon cutting, but then also to increase awareness that the room is now open and these are the amenities and this is what you can use it for, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the other reason that you might want to call the media. So before something happens, if you want to promote a program that's upcoming, so let's go back to our seniors book club. If you want to get publicity for that book club, you can send out something that's called a public service announcement to your local media. And that is simply the basic information about the book club and when it's going to start. Maybe you want to invite a photographer to come and take a picture of the group at their first gathering, that sort of thing. So you need to invite them. Basically, you need to invite the media, or you need to get the information out. You want to make sure that when you're reaching out to media, you get a specific contact person. Depending on your local publication, they might have a couple of reporters, and one generally does this kind of thing and the other one does that kind of thing. So you want to know who the specific reporter is that might want to deal with your library news. And certainly if you've been interviewed before, it's a good place to start with that person. You also want to know what their print deadlines are. So most community newspapers are weekly. So if it comes out on a Wednesday, for example, the deadline for the following week's issue might be Friday. And you just want to know that so that you can time your event so that it will get in the next available issue. If your paper comes out on Wednesday and you hold your event on Tuesday, it's going to be a whole week before it gets in the next issue because it's too late for the Wednesday issue. That one's already on the press. So make sure you understand the print deadlines when you're scheduling an event where you want coverage. You can always invite politicians. First of all, they're always happy to stand and get their photo taken. And secondly, they tend to, because they're prominent people, remember the reason why, what makes a story newsworthy. Because they're prominent people, you can often get more media coverage for something if you have a politician there. So it makes a great photo op. Be sure to add your event to the local event community event calendar, whether that's done through your local paper or maybe your town has a Facebook page where you can add community events. You want to make sure that you're popping your event or your activity into multiple places because we don't know where people are going to see this information. You want to make sure you're getting it out there. The other thing that you can do is be a local expert. So if you're delivering a new program, suppose you've developed this seniors book club, you know about book clubs, you might want to talk to the local paper and say, well, I'm the one that's delivering this program. And I'd be happy to speak to your reporter about, what a book club is, why we do it, the advantages to seniors, et cetera, et cetera. So be that local expert that a reporter can speak to and really give a lot more context to the interview. And then make sure you complete your business profile on Google. So I say this because not many people have done this. If you Google your library, ABC Library, you'll see on the right-hand side, there's usually an information column and it'll be populated by information that Google has found. So it might be a Google map, it might be your address, and then it'll say, do you own this business? Complete your profile. You want to do that because that's a place where you can add your website, you can add your hours of operation, and any other information. You can add a little description about your library and that sort of thing. So make sure that you do that because if people are looking for whatever program or activity you're promoting and they Google your library, it's an easy way to make sure they'll go straight to that box and they can see your website, and it just gets them there faster. It just makes it easier for people to find you. So then, after you've put out that initial PSA, public service announcement, to get reporters to your event, you can provide them with the information when they show up about who they can interview. So perhaps it's not only the library director, but see if you can get a patron who's willing to be interviewed. Maybe it's a parent of a child in a program who's willing to be interviewed. If you can line these people up in advance, it really adds richness to the story, and it helps it from being a story that's this big in the community paper to being something more substantial. Make sure that you have a fact sheet ready about your event, whatever activity you're promoting, that sort of thing, and general information about the library. So think about those key messages you have about your library. The library was established in 1962. It has grown from a collection of 1,000 books to 100,000 books, whatever it is that you can give. This is great filler. Sometimes, depending on space, a local paper may even add a little "did you know" sidebar. It's called the little side thing that goes beside an article. So any facts or figures you can give sort of rounds out the story and also gives more context to what you're doing. If you can give reporters a photo or a graphic on a thumb drive or email it to them, that's also very helpful. Sometimes, especially in smaller community papers, they don't have someone with a camera handy. Maybe that person's already assigned that day to something else. Make sure that you're augmenting your story with an image. We know that stories that run with a relevant image are significantly more memorable than stories that just run with text. So you're going to want to make sure you have a photo or a graphic or something that adds that visual interest to your story. It will be more memorable. And then, depending on the nature of the photograph, you might even end up on the front page, which is really, that's like that is the main goal, is to be on the front page. And then follow up with after the event. Suppose your local paper couldn't make it, no problem. Make sure you send the fact sheet and the photos, and you can also arrange to have those interviews done after the fact. Remembering that most communities have that weekly time frame. So if your deadline is a Friday and your event, the deadline is Friday for stories, you can oftentimes still contact the reporter either later that day or even Monday, depending on if they've got space still. They might still take a story, but if you have these things lined up where you've got some people who can be interviewed, you've got the facts and figures, and you've got a photo, makes it so much easier for them to actually cover your event. A little bit about news writing. So if you are writing that public service announcement, this is how journalists learn to write the news. And so whether it's for broadcast or for print, same rules apply. The lead is that typically a one sentence, maybe two sentences. It's like 25 words or less, the who, what, where, when, and why. And the reason it's done that way is that if you stopped reading or if you stopped watching the news, you would get the basic information that they were trying to convey. So that always goes in the lead. The bridge usually provides context. So the lead might be something like ABC Library announced today its new seniors book club that will meet every Thursday. The bridge gives context. This is the third book club that has been run in this library this year. So, when I say these things, you probably recognize it if you've been reading it. So you'll see the who, what, where, when, why, and then the bridge is just context. This is the third of the year. This is the 15th time, Fred has donated money or whatever the case may be. It just gives that context. And then the body is the main part of the article. And they'll write it in a way that the most important information follows to the least important information. And that's because if at the last minute the editor or the person laying out the paper says, oh my gosh, we don't have as much space as we thought, they will just hack it off. They'll hack the story off wherever it fits, frankly. It can be quite rudimentary. But that's why if you have ever read an article, and I've seen this happen a few times, either in the journal or if you read, I don't know, the New York Times or whatever, you may see see that the article kind of ends abruptly and you're kind of thinking, oh, well, what happened here? It's because it probably just didn't fit the space and an editor went like this and they chopped it off. So I'm boring you with this information because if you are writing for reporters, this is the format that they are used to working in. So if you follow the same format, if you start off with that who, what, where, when, why at the very beginning, you give them a little bridge that has some context, and then you go into all the details in descending order of importance. That's what they're used to. They're more likely to be able to use that information and make sure that they are conveying the facts that you want through their own story. They will rewrite it in most cases. Some community papers will print things verbatim if they're well written and they follow this format. That's always the best because then there's no interpretation to be had by a reporter or no extraneous information in there. It's just what you want to say. But even if that's not the case, this is the format that reporters are used to seeing, and therefore they're more likely to be able to quickly grab onto what it is that you're saying. Oftentimes I see people do the reverse. They'll start with the long history of the library was first established in 1962. And at that time, there were 1,000 books in the collection, and we didn't run any programs. And it was, the fourth library director who came along and said, hey, meanwhile, you're down, down, down into the story. It's too much background. You probably heard this expression, you've buried the lead. That's the lead. So the lead is, what's the who, what, where, when, why? Cut to the chase, get right to it, give the context, and then go into the long story about how the library was formed in 1962, da-da-da-da-da-da. So here's an example of a lead, the bridge, and the body. So ABC Library Board Chair Harry Potter today announced the creation of a new children's collection. This will add 200 materials to the library's overall collection of 2,500. So the lead is who, what, where, when, why. Board Chair Harry Potter. Today, the what is the creation of the new children's collection. The context, the bridge is, it gives some context to 200 materials are being added to the overall collection of 2,500. And then to start the body, oftentimes I like to use a quote from Harry Potter, the board chair. Gosh golly, this is fabulous, said Mr. Potter. Children are the future and need access to great books. And then you can start in with the story. ABC Library started a campaign 10 months ago to raise funds for a special children's collection. The goal, $15,000, was reached last week. The collection will focus on a mix of books for young. Now I'm getting into the weeds, right? We're talking about the kind of books we're doing, including books in other languages, materials by Indigenous authors, and so forth. It's the fourth campaign. Now I'm really in the weeds. So if you were reading this in your local paper, and you only got as far as the first two sentences, you would know the main facts that you need to know. Today, there's a new children's collection, 200 more materials, overall collection's 2,500. That's all you need to know. The rest of it is all background. And so this is how you can see, this is the way news writing works, so that people get the most important information right off the get-go. So why is this important? Reporters write the stories with the most important facts first. And so how you present the information will influence your story. It's true. If you ever ask people to give you a list of things, most often people will list the first thing that they say is the most important thing to them because it's the thing they thought of first. So how you present the information to the reporter will give that person a clue as to what you think is important. So you just bear that in mind. How you present the story will influence how they in turn relate your story to the public. And remember, the reporters are only a conduit, right? They're only just the tube that we're feeding information through. What you really want to do is speak to the people, the public at the other end. But they do have an important role to play. And the way that they interpret information, the way that they translate what you're saying to them, can either enhance your program and get you more people, donations, whatever, foot traffic, whatever it is you're trying to do, or it'll be a big meh, meh, so what? Okay, so you really want to be cognizant of how you position the information to make sure you are leading with the most important facts because that's what the reporter will take. Um, and the lead is really about, if you could only remember one thing, what would it be? So in this instance, if I could only remember one thing, I would remember, wow, there's a new children's collection at the library. That's the most important thing. The rest of it is all background information. You can reinforce your main message with examples and stories. I like to use them more than just numbers. So numbers are okay, but very few people will remember 200 new materials in a collection of 2,500. What they might remember, though, is if you can include some comments from a patron, a mom who says, "Oh my gosh, I'm so looking forward to being able to read to my child in Slovenian. That is my native language, and the library is going to get a Slovenian children's book, and I can't wait." That story is way more memorable than, you know, any number or fact or figure you can throw out there. Which is why we talk a lot about making sure that you have stories that you can convey because they really are more memorable for people than facts and figures. So let's practice. Now, I can't see you, but I want to practice. So I'm going to have to trust that you're going to play along here. Maybe we'll get some folks to put their answers in the chat. So the first one is a reactive media relations situation. So here's the situation. A person has overdosed in the library men's bathroom. He was discovered by a patron who told the librarian. The librarian called 911. Police and ambulance arrived within 10 minutes. The patron, a 10-year-old boy, was traumatized. His parents are upset. They want to know what the library is doing to prevent this from happening again. CTV called because they heard about the 911 call. And the reporter wants to know, how often does this happen? Are your staff trained to deal with it? Have you ever used I can't say this word, naloxone. Naloxone. Never could say that word. Have you ever used it before? How many of those, do you have on hand? All those kinds of things. So these are your key facts. So I'm going to ask you, if you can, to make a key message and pop it into the chat if you're comfortable doing that. What would be your key message out of all of these facts? How would you prepare to respond to reporters? Anybody want to offer anything? What's your key message here? You're the library director and someone has overdosed in your men's bathroom. What do you do? Very good, Penelope. We're supporting the police as they conduct an investigation into this. Yes, you want to defer this because it's likely a criminal matter. And if the police and ambulance are on site, they will deal with any questions related to any criminality, or certainly the EMTs will deal with any questions related to the individual, such as, they may or they may not say things like the patient is now responsive and we're transporting to hospital or something, but that's up to them. That's not up to you. Very good. Does anybody have anything else they want to, what would you do in this situation? This is your library. What about the 10-year-old boy and his parents? No ideas? You guys are being shy today. Um, what you might want to do with the parents is, first of all, pull them aside into a quiet space. Do not do this in front of other people. Don't have an audience. Oop, someone's answering me. Yay. Let the parents know that we will work with police to learn what happened and then follow through with some training. That's a good idea. That's a really good idea. Yeah, that's kind of what I was going to say. So, but you want to do it in a quiet space. You want to take them out of public view, because if they're upset, you want to try and make sure that they are not sort of re-traumatized by standing in the middle of the library. So bring them into a space where you can talk to them, obviously offer them like a glass of water or something, whatever comforts might help. Someone else has answered, library staff follow our policies and procedures when we are supporting the police as they investigate. While we handle the situation according to those guidelines, we regret the trauma that occurred and are reviewing to see if there's anything we can learn from this. Yes. So here's a handy little formula that I have used successfully in the past. It's called emotion, fact, action. So first deal with the emotion with the parents and just say, we're very sorry, as this person has suggested, we're very sorry this has happened. It obviously was not something within our control. This individual chose to do this here at the library, and we're very sorry that your son is the one who discovered him. The facts are, I'm going to use this person's words. Who is that? Sorry, I'm just going to scroll up. Joseph says, the facts, you don't say this, but in your mind, you're thinking the facts are, we followed our policies and procedures as best we could. We immediately called 911, and we are supporting police as they investigate. And then the action, again, Joseph, you nailed it. We are reviewing to see if there's anything that we could learn from this or do something differently in the future. And we certainly hope that this never happens again. So that kind of a formula, firstly, deal with the emotion. We're very sorry that, your son witnessed this and came across this. The facts are that the police are now investigating and we're giving them our full support. And the action is we will, when this is all over, we will review to see if there's anything we could do differently in the future. Those kinds of words can be very reassuring to someone who's in this kind of a situation, because they want to know, firstly, that you acknowledge their emotion, that you acknowledge that something traumatic has happened. Secondly, they want to understand the facts as you know them. Immediately we called 911 and police are investigating. Those are the facts as we know them. And then they want to know, so what are you going to do about it? And that's where, this idea of reviewing the situation after the fact to see if there's anything that can be learned or done differently in the future is a great way to let the patron know that you understand that this has been quite upsetting and that you are going to look to see if there's anything possible that could be done differently in the future. So those are really great responses. So thank you. I appreciate that. That's reactive. Now let's do proactive. So this is this book club again. We're doing a book club for adults. This time could be seniors, could be anybody. It meets the last Thursday of each month at 7:30. 10 copies of the book are available for participants. And then every month we do a different genre. So January's mystery, February's romance, whatever. So you have to get a media person, a reporter interested in covering this so that it gets publicity in the local community paper and you get participants. So your objective here is to get participants in the book club that's going to start up, and it's going to happen. Suppose this is the first week of April. So it's going to happen at the end of April. And you've got 10 copies of books available for this book club. What are your key facts? What do you put into that lead that you're going to write to send out to the reporter to get them interested in this story? Anybody have any thoughts? You're going to draft the who, what, where, when, why, the very first sentence that you're going to try and attract some media interest to your program. What would you put in that to make it interesting? Have you done this before? Have you done media relations where you've tried to get the reporter out to cover a program that you're offering or a new piece of equipment, or maybe you've got a 3D printer? Have you done this before where you've reached out to your local paper to get some coverage? And if so, what did you do? Anybody want to share anything? So this webinar format is not as conducive to these kinds of exercises as a regular Zoom meeting, because you have to type into the chat. But if I can ask you to think about that. If you've ever done this before, what have you done? What's worked for you before? Okay, well, not seeing anything. So what I would offer then is maybe you send or you drop by the local paper, maybe with a copy of the book that's being read, maybe a photograph of the cover, some visual, and you say, look, we're starting up this new book club for adults, anybody over the age of 18. We're going to meet the last Thursday of each month to talk about the book. So people have a month to read the book. Here it is. You know, these programs are really good because they help, especially newcomers to the community to meet other people. Or this one's going to be focused on moms, and so maybe it's a moms group, and moms can meet other moms. Whatever the objective is, you're going to want to talk about these things so that it's more interesting than just launching a book club, right? You're going to want to talk about something that makes it new or fresh or newsworthy, to be honest. Maybe it's the book itself. Maybe it's the latest bestseller that's burning up the charts. And so, here's an inside scoop. If someone's looking to read this book, join the book club, because all of our copies will be dedicated to the book club this month. Something like that. So you can do these things to try and get a reporter interested in writing a little blurb. Don't forget to include some sort of photograph or visual, whether it's just a copy of the cover. Maybe you've got a nice display of the 10 copies of the book on the table, artfully displayed. Maybe it's a picture of the space, maybe with some people in it, so it looks warm and welcoming. Whatever you think would really sort of catch people's attention, but you definitely want to include some sort of visual to make it memorable if the story runs. Okay, so I'm just about wrapping up here. I will take any questions that you have, but you got this. So make sure you gather your facts, have your key messages, use plain language, check your facts and figures, don't offer your personal opinion, don't answer hypotheticals. It's okay to say, I don't know. Never take a cold call interview, and less is more. So if you've said what you need to say, stop talking. Less is more. So I will take any questions, pop them into either the chat or the Q&A, and we can see if you have, if there's anything I can answer for you. Maybe you've had an experience, or maybe you want to ask me about something that's coming up. I'm happy to give you some tips or advice on how to proceed.
Thank you so much, Sue. That was really thorough, a really great webinar. I actually have a question.
Sure, shoot.
How proactive should you be when should you be proactive about everything? Say you do have Pride programming coming up, you haven't heard any rumblings about it. Do you want to advertise it, or is it better to stay under the radar if there's no crisis happening yet?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point, especially if you know that there's something that's controversial. I would say, firstly, read the room. So what's the temperature in your community? If you're in Westlock, for example, where they just banned pride flags and colored sidewalks, I think you want to not necessarily poke people with pushing out that information. I think you're going to want to be a bit more subtle about it. If you're in another community where it's quite accepted and there's no big deal, then absolutely you can go forward with it. But you really want to, when you're dealing with controversial subjects, you really want to be aware of the environment and really sort of understand the consequence of your actions. So am I going to do more harm than good? Am I going to stir up a controversy where none currently exists and where people can come in and enjoy the programming and not feel threatened in any way or create any kind of a situation? Unfortunately, it's the world we live in. Not everybody agrees on everything. And while I am a big advocate for free speech, I do draw the line at, when people don't feel safe, obviously. So I think you do have to use some common sense and really just sort of read the temperature of the community and just figure out for yourself, how's the best way to promote this program without sort of, pushing it in people's faces if that's not what they're into.
Is there any potential for backlash if you don't advertise it and then people feel like you're hiding it, or?
So my question would be, what's the standard? Do you advertise every single program? If you do, then I feel like you have a duty to advertise this one to the same degree. If you don't, if you just promote selected programs, then you're safe. You can say, well, we promote these, we don't promote those. So it was, I think it depends on your context. This is where you can fall back on your organizational policies, procedures, standards, that kind of thing. If you produce, I don't know, like a spring calendar of events and you put every single event in there, then yes, you have to put it in there first.
Yeah.
We have a question. Thank you. Thoughts on how to handle when you are partnering with another organization? Might need a bit more about that, Angie, but is this where you're making some sort of a joint announcement, or there's some joint, maybe it's with your local school library, say, or something else? I think what you want to do is you want to develop those key messages together. A joint event, perfect. So you want to develop those key messages together with your partner and make sure that you're both on the same page. It starts really with making sure that you both also have the same objective. Like, what is your objective in hosting this joint event? Is it to get more people into the library because, foot traffic is down? That's an objective. So and make sure that you're agreed on what the prime objective is. What is it you're trying to achieve here? And then secondly, once you have that understanding, then you can write the key messages that will help you achieve that objective. And so, I think that that's the best way to work with a partner. And then I've also done things where I've developed like a Q&A document so that we're agreed on how would we answer these things. Sometimes, depending on the nature of the program, you might want to have a very clear delineation of responsibilities for who responds to what kind of question. So if it's about these topics, that's going to be the library manager. If it's these topics, it's going to be the partner. So you have that really clear delineation so you don't, mow each other's grass kind of situation. I think just really having those meetings and having that discussion up front is very important, because it just manages people's expectations and then everybody knows what we're doing. So I hope that helps. Christine says, I worry that the LGBTQ community that is there who may not have a voice won't know the resources available for them if the events aren't advertised and materials aren't displayed, or they're displayed in hidden areas. Yeah, very fair question. I think it's really tricky. There's no question. This is particularly a very controversial topic. And I think that the challenge with it is, for a lot of people, it's black or white. There's not a whole lot of gray in there. So people are either for it or opposed to it. And there's not a lot of people just in the middle. And so this can be a challenge for sure. If you have any kind of pride organization or groups or Facebook pages in your community that you can reach out directly, that might be a way to make sure that the community is aware that you've got some resources for them. So that's one way to go, is do that kind of a direct outreach. I think that even if you display them, I'm not suggesting they have to be hidden, but maybe it's not the first thing you see when you come in. So find that happy medium where it's on display, it's not hidden, but it's not the very first thing someone sees when they come in, because people who are on the other side of the coin may feel offended before they've even come into the library. And so you want to make sure that you find that happy balance where you can have it on display, but maybe not the very first thing you see when you walk in the door. Hopefully that helps. I know some libraries also have little pride flags on their windows or doors, just to signify that it's a safe space, secure space for people who, and that also gives a signal to the community, I think. It's a subtle way of dealing with it. Hope that helps. What do you think about turning off or hiding comments on Facebook when they get out of hand? Absolutely, it's your account. I would. We see this more and more. It used to be that you didn't do that because then people would accuse you of something. I'm sorry, it's your account. If you feel that the comments are no longer given in a spirit of respectful free speech, then absolutely. But you should put that disclaimer in your bio that says, this is a respectful place for dialogue, and we reserve the right to turn off comments, or words like that. Let people know that that's your policy. But absolutely. It used to be years ago, media would allow comments on their stories, and even they've stopped doing that for the most part because people have just gotten out of hand. There are keyboard warriors out there who hide behind anonymity, and they say horrendous things. And frankly, nobody needs to see that. If they want to make those kind of statements on their own Facebook page, knock yourself out. But this is your Facebook page, and you have the right to control what is said on it. So absolutely. That goes for any social media platform, to be honest. Yeah. I think that you have that responsibility as well, in order to, if you say that you are a safe space or a respectful space, then you have to also demonstrate that to people, that you are being respectful. And it's not about free speech at that point. It's about making sure that people don't feel threatened or traumatized by some of the things that people are saying. And the best way actually is just to turn off commenting altogether. Don't just hide individual comments, because then it looks like you're cherry picking, right? You're now applying a judgment to every comment. Better just to turn them all off. Yeah. Any other questions? If a controversy, online spaces should have the same policies as physical space. Absolutely. That's exactly what I'm saying. That is exactly it. And if something happens on a social media platform, there's a couple things you can do. And this is sort of separate from media relations, but we have a few minutes here. So what I would suggest is that if a controversy has bubbled up, if it's simply a question that people are asking, you can go ahead and answer it. If it starts to get into a debate back and forth, then you want to cut it off. Okay. You want to invite that person to come and speak to you personally, whether it's on the phone or by email or to stop by the library, but you want to take it out of the public realm. If it's just a question, then you have to assess for yourself, is this something that lots of people might be wondering about, in which case it might make sense to answer it. It just depends on the circumstance. But if you feel like it's someone's being angry, it doesn't even matter what the topic is. You definitely do not want to respond to those in a social media platform. You want to invite that person to contact you directly, direct message, email, phone, drop by the library, whatever it is, but you want to deal with that person one-to-one. What happens when you start to deal with things in a public realm is that people who may not have thought of the issue can suddenly get riled up. They go, yeah, what he said, and then next thing you know, you've got all kinds of problems. So you don't want that. You definitely want to try and deal with those people offline. Any other questions about media relations? Has anybody done any media relations? And if so, how did it go? Oftentimes when I ask this question, I get a lot of people say that they were misquoted. So just want to know what your experience is, if you have any. It's always good learning to have, depending on what happens. And if you have abdominal surgery, don't be like Kate Middleton. That's all I'm saying. Make sure your friends and family see pictures of you from time to time. Any other questions? Oh, yeah, you bet. Yeah. Thanks for reassuring you not to rush the answer. 100%. Yeah, it's really like talking to anybody. I think people feel pressure to talk to a reporter and then I must answer the question immediately. Well, if it was your neighbor talking over the back fence and you didn't have the answer, you'd probably say, well, geez, Mary, I'll have to look into that for you. I'll get back to you. It's no different, really. You don't have to give an instant answer. It's okay to even think about it. It's okay to get back to them. All those things are okay. And you won't look, I often hear this, but I'll look stupid. No, you won't. Trust me, you won't. First of all, they're never going to air something like that. So even if the camera's rolling, they're never going to air somebody saying, gee, I don't know, I'll get back to you. Right? They're going to edit that out. Chances are they're going to edit that out. But even if they didn't, so what? So you said, I don't know, I'll get back to you. Doesn't make you sound stupid. But I hear that a lot from people that I do training. I do a lot of media relations training, and that's the number one concern. I don't want to look stupid. But you don't. It really comes down to how you kind of carry yourself, how you project your voice, that sense of authority that you bring to the interview, the reassuring calm that you know what you're talking about, so that if you do have to say, oh man, I don't seem to have that figure at hand, I'll get back to you. No big deal. Yeah. It's you just have to treat it, like, take a deep breath and just sort of center yourself. And I think that also helps quite a bit, just to get rid of the anxiety. I can tell a funny story. So way back when, a million years ago, when I first started my career, I was the special events director at the city of Edmonton, and we were working on the royal visit of Charles and Diana to Edmonton, believe it or not. And I had an investigative reporter contact me because he wanted the menu for the dinner that we were hosting for Charles and Diana. He wanted the menu, mostly so he could say, oh, look what the fancy people are eating, and how much does this cost? Like, I knew exactly where he was going with this. And how old was I? Early 20s. I was like 23. Very limited experience, and it scared the crap out of me. So I stuck to my key messages. He wasn't happy because I think he asked to speak to me specifically because he knew that I was relatively new in my career. I stuck to my key messages, but man, that really rattled me. Afterward, many years later, not immediately, it turned out okay, by the way. Many years later, I thought to myself, why am I giving this person my power? Why am I giving over my power to somebody I don't even know? I can control what I do. I can control what I say. It's really the only power I have, is to control me. I can't control somebody else. So just, if you think about it that way, don't give over your power to somebody that you don't know. Make sure that you remain in control, remain calm. If somebody does print something that's inaccurate, by the way, I get this question a lot. You can correct it. Just call the reporter and say, thanks for doing the story. You reported that we have 100,000 books in our collection. We actually only have 10,000, so you added an extra zero. Could you print a correction? 9 times out of 10, they'll do it. If you encounter a situation where a reporter is doing something and they're not really behaving appropriately, or and by that I mean maybe they're pushing too hard, or that you feel bullied, or I don't know, whatever the circumstances, you can also go to their editor and just say, you know what, this person, we had this happen on a construction site, for example. We knew a camera crew had gone past the barriers that were there for personal safety. And we had to ask them to come back out of that area, even though they'd been warned beforehand. I went to their editor and I said, look, just so you know for future, your guys cannot do this. You cannot go into a construction zone. It's not safe. So you can do that. But always start with the reporter if you can, because you don't want to burn any relationships. You don't want to cause any hard feelings, because the next time you need something from them or the next time there is a controversy, you really want to be on good terms with these people. So, but yeah, usually I find if it's just a simple error, they're happy to print a retraction or a correction, and they'll fix it up in the next issue. So usually pretty good about that. Everybody makes mistakes, right? Any other questions or concerns? I should say, the other thing I would say to you is if you ever get interviewed on TV, most people are most afraid of that, but actually that's your best opportunity, because I can hear your voice, I can see your facial expression, I can read your body language. The same thing, and we've all done this, right? The difference between a phone call and an email with the same content. An email can quickly get misconstrued. Whereas if you have a chance to be on TV, on a TV camera, most people go, oh, no, 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 I don't want to do that. Actually, it's your best opportunity, because that's where people can really get the full extent of your words and your intent and your tone, language, body language. So don't shy away from it as much as you might be tempted to. And again, I hear that a lot. I'll do a newspaper interview, but I won't be on TV. Might want to rethink that. And also, a lot of newspapers now send out videographers because they shoot stuff for their websites. So you might have to get used to having that video camera. If it really makes you nervous, practice. If you know you've got an interview coming up, get someone to get their phone, set it up, and practice an interview with it, with the camera on you, if that makes you nervous. Practicing helps a lot. Anything else, gang? No? Okay, well, thanks for joining me today. I hope that you got some little nuggets of information here that's helpful to you. Certainly, if you find yourself in a situation, give me a shout. Happy to help you if I can. We want to make sure that you feel well supported as you deal with media. Very rarely, I think, will you encounter those sort of oh my gosh, it's a reporter calling, and you're more likely, I think, to have the opportunity to actually do the outreach and try and get media interested in what's going on at your library. So I really encourage you to think about that. So thank you very much for joining me today. Thanks, Penelope.